Hello, hello. Nothing like being between you and cocktails. So I'll start with like groundbreaking news. You're here to witness something for the first time, going an entire day without spilling something on a white dress. So I'm just like, and it's extra special to be here also because, fun fact, co-founder of CommerceNext, Scott Silverman, and I have known each other for over 20 years, and I don't know if you remember this, Scott, but we put together at shop.org the first ever panel on social networks and LinkedIn and MySpace and other ones that weren't around anymore. Yeah. Anyways, all right, let's get started. So raise your hand if you've heard of Story. Okay. Raise your hand if you've been to Story Chelsea. Raise your hand if you've been to Story at Macy's. All right. That's going to help me figure out how much to talk about what. I have 96 slides that I'm convinced I can get through in less than 20 minutes, so let's go. This is the Jacob Javits Center. This is not, oh, that's not behind me. It's there. Sorry. That is not where Story's located, but it is where my retail career began. I'm 4 generations of retail entrepreneurship. I'm a 4th generation retail entrepreneur. And my mom was there shopping for her business, and I was there to buy my bat mitzvah favors wholesale. And I was walking with her aisle after aisle looking at all this merchandise, and I stopped and I looked at her and I was like, this is a job? You can like shop for a living? So I was like, sign me up. So fast forward, went to school in Colorado, studied economics, don't remember a thing, moved to New York, became an accidental consultant for 10 years, mashing up marketing, merchandising, business development. And over the years of these random theories, working with a range of clients, big and small, it was 2011, and I had this idea after observing all these startups and all this funding happening online and looking at new business models like subscription retail and crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. And I'm like, if we're the same people who live online who live offline, why the heck aren't we thinking differently about the offline experience? Now, I know that's a popular topic now. In 2011, people looked at me like I had 40 heads, and they'd give me like a one-way ticket to an insane asylum about opening up a brick-and-mortar store. And here it is. It's on 10th Avenue. It was on 10th Avenue and 19th Street, and we opened in December 2011. The concept behind Story is a space that has the point of view of a magazine. We reinvent it entirely every 2 months like a gallery, and we sell things like a store. You'll notice that the identity, we're always called Story, but the narrative changes, like we're a living magazine. So I think of what we do a lot like retail media. And you think of the cover of a magazine that sets the tone for what that issue is all about, right? So this is the cover of InStyle's color issue. This is the cover of our color issue. You open up a magazine, you have a letter from an editor expressing an editorial point of view adjacent to paid advertising, as well as editorial picks. And so if you think about it, magazines tell stories by writing articles and taking pictures. And in retail media, we tell stories by curating merchandise around a subject matter and then having events that bring that subject matter to life. But we have 2 revenue streams. Magazines have advertisers and we have sponsors. So when we did Color Story, we brought in Benjamin Moore as a sponsor. Now, at first, I wasn't sure how this would go, right? Like putting up a logo in a boutique environment. But here's the thing. Benjamin Moore knows far more about color than I'll ever know. So if they add authority and authenticity to the conversation, guess what? They're part of the narrative, and it's that much more compelling for the consumer. So this is kind of how the store came to life with different color sections. So I'll go through just a couple of examples of Story Chelsea, and then I'll get into some of the stuff and thoughts and theories on retail experience at Macy's. This was Have Fun Story. We teamed up with this beverage called Pepsi. The only place in the store you could see their logo is on the bottom of that column. We told stories by taking emojis that were their campaign for the season and using that as the voice to bring the experience in store to life. We had YR Studio. Do you guys know YR Studio? If you don't, check it out. So you can print on demand in store real time, but what's really cool about it is it's all over printing. So within 15 minutes, someone's in and out of the store with a custom shirt. And it was great having all this IP from a brand that customers had the opportunity to do themselves as well as photos, because who doesn't like a photo? So basically, after testing out these theories and doing all these different things in story, to me, it's really, and again, I'm not saying anything that no one in this room doesn't know, that it really isn't just about a place that sells things, it's about an experience. This is Remember When story, when we teamed up with Nickelodeon. And I think that when we think of experience, right, we think of theater and connecting and events and community, as we should. But I also think that sometimes it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we're in retail and we sell things, and product can be theater and experience. So with Nickelodeon, we created a range of different products. When you walked into the store, you see on the right, our letter from the editor was like a valedictorian speech. And then you were in homeroom. You went throughout the experience and kind of, I don't know, whoever's old enough in the room to remember this, I was excited. None of my millennial employees had any idea what I was talking about. And this is an example of some of the product we created. So we did Keds, Smashbox. We did a range of different product in a very fast period of time. And then we used that merchandise as a tool, whether it was distributing it at other retailers like Neiman Marcus, whether it was doing pop-ups in LA with Fred Siegel, and then if it was through different marketing social media activations. I had to include the slime Rolex because it's kind of fun. And just some other examples of the product that we designed and we created. So a lot of what story has been for me, and what I hope it continues to be in this next chapter of my journey, is testing and learning and experimenting and seeing things differently. I like this slide because on the left, you may or may not recognize some of these characters, whether it's SpongeBob or Ren and Stimpy. And on the right, it's even a further evolution of that pattern and a distortion looking somewhat like Missoni, and that was one of the prints that we did. And so I use that as an example of doing things differently and thinking differently, because that's kind of what led me to this next chapter, right? Not obvious, like girl, one store, New York City, Macy's, 600 stores in malls, promotional. But that was so exciting because to me, if we are gonna change, we're gonna have to do this at scale. And it's not about taking story and plopping it in there because it ain't gonna work. So how do we take experience and scale it and creativity? And so I always say, thanks, Jeff, because Jeff Gannett's the one who took a leap of faith and knows I like to color outside the lines and has been letting me do so ever since. So on April, now I'm going to forget the date, 13th, we launched 36 stories on the same day. We relocated our Chelsea store to Herald Square with a 7,500 square foot flagship. And we really set out to see how could we, take the idea of story, right? Narrative-driven retail, take the idea of sponsorship in multiple revenue streams, take the idea of events and community, and really build a model that's both agile and could scale. And there's nothing I think I want to add to my business card that I don't even have, corporate skeptic, because words like agility are thrown around so easily and often. And it's like, well, is it really agile? And I was like, we can never, ever mention that word. Let's just launch 36 stores on the same day and they'll get it. And it worked. So I'll tell you a little bit about the process that we followed. So when I started in June of last year, I was going around, I'm kind of more on the creative side of things. And so, but to do this scale thing, I got to figure out logistics and operations. And so I went office to office, really starting with the stuff under the hood of the car. And as we were having conversations, a colleague and I, who started the same day, and I kind of looked at each other and were like, well, if we have to learn about how Macy's is doing things, and we have to create processes for us to do things, why can't we use this as a living lab and give our colleagues an opportunity to use us as guinea pigs? Worst that happens is it doesn't work. And it's better that it doesn't work on me than in 36 stores. And so we really took every point of the process to really explore and examine how we could do that. So it was working with colleagues, it was working with vendors, and then customers. So by the end of it, I can't remember the most recent count. When we launched, it was 438 colleagues across all of Macy's. We're either on a conference call and a meeting, because I thought, the day we sold the company to Macy's, this should have nothing to do with me, and it should be collaborative and participatory and an event and an experience for everyone, and I think that is so key. It's not lost on me that entrepreneurs in corporate environments might have a different speed of doing things, but I think it became such an amazing opportunity, and with less than a week's notice, we had 98 of the 438 show up for a picture. In terms of the roles and how we built the team, it was really looking at roles differently, and not jobs, but roles. So when we merchandise, it's not by category or price point, right? It's narrative driven. And it's not men's socks or women's handbags. And so really, how can we hack together new roles and hire both from within the Macy's ecosystem and outside? Anyone heard of this guy, Aaron Dignan? He's amazing. TheReady.com, I don't get any kickbacks from this. I'm just a huge fan. He is all about reimagining how people work. And I thought, what the heck do I know about building a team more than 5? And I definitely need one now. And so I thought, okay, I want to make sure we have the right culture. And if we're going to do this agile thing without talking about this agile thing, I want to make sure we have the right parts under the hood of the car. And so we've had someone from his team embedded in ours day by day, teaching us new ways to do meetings and decision making so that it's more flat and democratic in flow. And then we took the same thing and kind of created a program for store colleagues. So we have over 270 dedicated story colleagues that went through a training program that we created. And I think that's another thing, back to the online, offline, is that, losing a little bit the joy and the enthusiasm around the product, but also we have these physical spaces in their stores. And the retail colleague is the vessel in which you acquire customers, right? They are the analog version of a banner ad. So how can we make sure it is effective and that it is engaging and that it has a high CPA? And so that's a program that has been incredibly, incredibly successful. And part of what that's been about isn't just about the transaction, but how can we use offline tactics for email acquisition? And how can we create a new KPI dashboard where it isn't just about the transaction, but I can look back at how many new customers we acquired, the amount of new emails, so on and so forth. So this is a little bit about how it happened. So that's how it came together. And so I thought what I would do now is just walk you through both the first story that we launched and how we kind of translated some of the things we learned and that worked in our one little store and how it's kind of come to life at scale and with larger scope. And then, of course, what kind of marketer would I be if I didn't plug the current story? So to launch our brand at Macy's, my aha moment, which by the way was like 6 weeks before launching, was like, wait, nobody knows what story is. Like, sure, maybe if a pocket of people in the retail industry, if you're in New York, but we had stores in Bellevue, Washington, and Kentucky, and Ohio, all over the place. No one knows what story is. And so I was like, okay, branding campaign, 6 weeks, okay. And then it's like, well, how can we launch a brand that's true to who we are, but also feel and stands out, but also works within the Macy's ecosystem? And we really honed in on discovery. And I think, Macy's is where you go when you find what you're looking for. Story is where you go when you find what you're not looking for, unless you're like waking up at 2 in the morning dreaming of sushi socks and champagne gummy bears. And so it was kind of like, okay, how do you disrupt certain behaviors and mindset of this brand, right? You go to Macy's, you buy a dress, maybe you pick up a mascara and you leave. It's like, when's the last time you went to the supermarket and browsed every single aisle? It just doesn't happen. So really honing in on this idea of discovery. When we got to this space, it's been a huge concern. I didn't say it was, it still continues to be. These are open format environments. And so Story had 4 walls. And P.S., each one of these environments are different sizes and different shapes. And by the way, when you're doing a color story and you want things merchandise on the right color carpet tile, worst idea on the planet. But we went to construction and we're like, hey, what do you think of like digging up the floor so we can change it every 2 months? And they're like, never had that request, but like, okay, let's try it. And so I think that it's been awesome to kind of have those experiences. Is it all holly go lightly? No. I'd probably say 7 out of 10. I call them the yes and versus the yes but. And so here's kind of how the narrative side of the merchandising came to life. One thing that's really important to me and to us as a brand that's core to our DNA is working with small businesses. And so one of the processes we came up with was a way to onboard non-EDI compliant vendors at scale and pay them in 30 days and give them 1 point of contact. The average space at Story is 1,500 square feet, and we launched with an average of 70 small businesses in each space. And to me, it's not just the small business who wins, right? Because the customer wins because it's new product. And like my dream is, at the end of a couple years to say, hey, we generated $20 million for small businesses across the country. This is Herald Square and an experience we had downstairs. We had a tremendous amount of success with personalization. I made that bag, world's largest Light Bright, kind of fun. That was awesome, a company called Lightzilla. And we launched sponsorship, a revenue stream that, sure, there's co-op advertising and all that stuff, but not traditionally in this form. So when we think about sponsorship at Macy's, I kind of put it in 2 buckets. How do we work with existing vendors and partners and give them an experience they can't get at other retailers they work with? And how do we give them the opportunity to test and learn, to launch new products that they can then roll out with us at scale in more doors? And then how can it also be an opportunity to work with new vendors? So MAC, longtime partner of Macy's, right? There's all these new direct-to-consumer brands out there. Every other day there's a new cosmetic company launching. So, we wanted to see how can we reimagine and try new things with MAC, and we did a make-your-own palette experience that you could only do in their professional doors, and even tested out some technology that they've never even had in the US. This was one of my favorites, is we're just now, I think if it's not up, it will be any day now. We're launching an exclusive collaboration with Levi's and Crayola, which I actually had no idea about, and I was pitching Crayola on a sponsorship. And long story short, I was like, you want to expedite a couple SKUs and get them to me 6 months earlier? And after the laugh, it actually happened, and we were able to get it in-store and online. And so it was, how can we use our experience as a living press release and create buzz for things that are happening in our core business? Because, right, again, the benefit shouldn't just be within the color block of where Story is. And this is what we consider our in-store ad. There's only one place in the space you'll see a brand's logo. CIY Crayola was that logo. And you saw the other Levi's one. events. We did over 350 events when we launched. 10% of people who RSVP'd to events came to 2 or more events. There was a spike in sales anytime we had an event. And what's fascinating is too, this blew me away. Like this happened all the time at Story where people would like send us pictures of, oh, look what I made and my grandson's doing this. And the idea that people were doing that at Macy's was pretty special. So launched, got almost 1 billion media impressions. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we weren't talking about it a lot, / at all, and it just kind of happened. And there you have it. So last but not least, the current story. I am over time, so I broke my promise, but hopefully it's only 60 seconds over time. It's outdoor story, and it's fun. So I walked into Jeff Gannett's office one day and I said, so is Dick's Sporting Goods a competitor? And he's like, I don't know, maybe a little. Why do you ask? And I was like, oh, I think they should sponsor Story. He's like, another retailer is gonna pay to sponsor something at Macy's? I was like, why not? And like, let's be honest, like outdoors and Macy's, like in terms of authority and authenticity, Dick's would give a lot of credibility to the conversation. So would Miracle-Gro. So our 2 sponsors are Miracle-Gro and Dick's Sporting Goods, right? And it's things that are, you know, unlikely bedfellows. You could never imagine them together, and once they're together, you can't imagine them apart. So we launched, they have this table called 12. It's a side table where you can grow herbs and plants in your house, which is kind of fun. They're launching a new direct-to-consumer business called Green Digs in September. So they use this experience as R&D to test out new product categories before they launch that business. We had apparel from Dick's brands, ranging from Field and Stream to Alpine Design, and worked in other products from throughout the store. And a couple other images, and there you have it. So I just landed on this image because in the history of Macy's being in Pittsburgh and Ross Park, they've never done an event outside. And who thought that a neighboring retail would be the excuse to get outside and have a barbecue. So I encourage and invite you guys all to come visit us at Herald Square, wherever you are, and thank you for allowing me to be the end of the day wrap up, and go cocktail.
Thank you very much, Rachel.